Hello and welcome to today's session, Supervising Members, Cultivating Collaborative Communication. We know that communication is truly in the center of everything we do. We communicate verbally, in writing, through body language, and sometimes we communicate in ways to try and convey a point or a specific message. But ultimately, we really want our communication to be effective such that the other person receives and understands what we are communicating. The same is true of you and your VISTA project. Of course, you want to be the reciprocal communicator between you and your members, and you want that communication to be effective, strong, and continuous. You want to, as we said earlier, cultivate collaborative communication. My name is Eric Powell, and I'm happy to be an AmeriCorps VISTA training specialist at AmeriCorps headquarters in Washington, D.C. Having served as a VISTA member and a VISTA leader, as well as a VISTA program coordinator, I'm here today to host and present today's session, along with facilitating a couple of chat activities and the live Q&A at the end of the webinar. Today we're going to discuss a couple of things. We'll start out with looking at your various communication audiences and with whom you are communicating. We'll then talk about the purposes and goals of communicating with your members. I know it should be pretty obvious, but it'll be a quick review. We also know that sometimes people encounter challenges in communicating with members, so we'll briefly highlight some challenges and how to overcome them. And then we'll spend a good portion of today's session talking about the 5 C's to help you be more effective in your communicating with members. Finally, we'll end up with some recommendations and resources. We'll ask you to complete an evaluation of today's session, and then we'll have time to answer some of your questions. Your role as a VISTA supervisor probably has you interacting with many people. In knowing all those with whom you come in contact, it is truly important that you understand your audience when it comes to learning how to create a culture of communication. And as your VISTA project got started, you likely began communicating with folks at your VISTA project. That may include staff, volunteers, members of your board of directors, community members, or many other people. Once your VISTA project got started and you then began working on recruitment efforts, including advertising, marketing positions, etc., you or someone at your project then would have had some type of written or verbal communication with people who may be interested in your VISTA project. These could be individuals who contact you for more information about your project, as well as those applicants who actually go and create and submit an application to your project. Then, as you continue through the recruitment, interviewing, and selection process, you then had to handle important communication with your candidates that you selected, those candidates that were approved to serve and who are preparing to start service. And then eventually, communication with your active members who are on board and serving with your VISTA project. All 3 of these audiences are critical, and it does help to make sure that your communication to all of them at all stages is reviewed and enhanced. For today's presentation, we're going to specifically focus our attention on actual currently serving members and your communication with them. But please know that some of the recommendations and resources we give you, you may be able to apply to other audiences as well. With your VISTA members, you as the supervisor have such an important, influential, and inspirational role. You're communicating with your members about VISTA policy and regulations, which includes prohibited activities and permissible activities that may require approval. More details on all of these, of course, are in the VISTA member handbook. Also, you're reminding them about VISTA civil rights and responsibilities and VISTA terms and conditions. Then, as you supervise them, you're also working to ensure that they follow these guidelines. You are also outlining the rules and guidelines of your VISTA project, some of which may align with the VISTA program rules, and some of which may be different. You want to make sure that you are also communicating the overall goals and plan for your VISTA project, because think about it, your members likely want to know not just what they're doing during their year of service, but they really also want to know how their service fits into a larger mission and plan. Take some time educating your members on these pieces of the project and learn how to communicate with them about your VISTA project goals. I know, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. In explaining to them how VISTA service is different from other AmeriCorps programs, You're explaining to them their VISTA assignment description, or VAD. This is the document that truly outlines the VISTA member's year of activities, and you need to give them the overall context and background, as well as specific details about what they will be doing during their year of service. Also, you want to make sure that you communicate where specifically in the VAD they may need more support, have challenges, need more time, etc. Because whether you created the VAD or inherited the VAD, you likely know and should know most of the information in it. So the more you can communicate to your members about what they should be able to expect or where they may have questions, the better. You really want to help them to be glad about their VAD. Another brief overview is that you also want to be communicating to them about your specific supervision style so that they know what to expect when working with you. In conjunction with that, be sure to outline your communication style and your preference, whether it's texting, phone call, etc., and ask them about how they most effectively would like to be supervised and receive communication. Yes, here we are specifically talking about communicating about communication. Seems obvious, I know, but it really takes work to make happen effectively. We don't want you to take it for granted because this is one of the areas that can easily go overlooked. But when you really focus on it and work with your members to understand supervision, communication, and how all that works together, it really sets you and everyone else up for success. Throughout their year of service, remember that your members want to grow personally and professionally. We know that you have a lot of work to do, but it is also in your best interest to communicate with them about ways you think that they can improve and also to get professional development. For example, your project or sponsoring organization may conduct webinars on its own, maybe there's trainings they can attend or classes that your member knows about, or you may even want to work with your member to consider external sources for learning. They don't always have to be paid, they could be free things, but think about how you can communicate ways for your member to learn and grow, to use this not just as a year of service, but a year where they can also grow personally and professionally. And of course, I want to remind you, don't forget to refer them to the very popular monthly professional webinar series for VISTA members that's conducted by VISTA headquarters. Your members do look to you for guidance, so the more that you can communicate to them about additional opportunities for learning and growth, the better. There's also numerous other things that you probably want to tell them verbally, visually, in writing, etc. Some of these things are very specific to your VISTA project, such as cultural norms in the community that they should know before interacting with community members. Other things could be ideas for them to become more engaged and connected to the area. Maybe you organize fun activities or invite them to local events. That maybe is not specific to your VISTA project, but it's helping acclimate to them and communicate to them verbally and even through body language that you care about them as a person and a VISTA member. Your project and you can probably think of other things that you need and want to communicate to your members. So when you have a chance, make a list for yourself and think about how you see the importance of integrating communication throughout every aspect of what you do as a VISTA supervisor. As I mentioned earlier, this should be pretty obvious to you, so I'm not going to go in detail, but I will highlight just a few purposes and goals of effective communication in general, as well as in relation to your members and your VISTA project. In most cases, we're not communicating just for the sake of communication. We have reasons why we communicate, how, when, and to whom. And I personally find it useful to periodically step back and review these, even in my own work, to make sure that my communication is put into perspective and to help me ground my communication plan and style. So to start, communication in general, and especially with your members, serves purposes to provide information that may be necessary or simply useful. You're sharing information with them that you think they need or want to know as they start their year of service and as they continue. You also want to increase the knowledge that they have about a particular topic or a subject, especially in relation to the VAD, and expand their knowledge on your VISTA project and how it aims to eliminate poverty in the community. Explain or clarify details. Communication is great at this. And think, for example, about the VISTA assignment description and how you may have used acronyms or phrases that could be confusing or may need additional explanation, and it gives you a chance to clarify those details for your member. And then also, communication enables you to hear directly from your members about how they are doing overall and their service experience. And I can't stress enough how valuable this is. And I'll quickly say whether you hear from them, again, verbally and writing, they could draw a picture. There's a lot of options. But when you really think about how they're communicating with you, just as much as how you're communicating with them, it really helps you to tell the story of how they're doing and how you can help them improve. And again, it allows them to ask any questions, mention any concerns they have, tell you what's going well, but it also gives them a chance to give you ideas on how they think things can be better and more. So, as a note for comparison, I'll quickly say that I used to play soccer. Now, notice I didn't say I was good at it, I just said I used to play it. But I loved soccer. And although we learned that one goal of soccer game may, of course, maybe to win the game, people like to win, it's great. There were also other goals, such as how do you learn to work with a team? Or there were goals of wanting to acquire new skills, learning how to do a proper throw in or kick with the other foot. These goals are also true of other sports and activities, of course. But the same is true with communication. Okay, in reality, you're not trying to win communication, but you do want to create a collaborative environment of you and your members working together to learn, acquire new skills, and succeed in your efforts. When you think about effectively speaking and writing to share information with your members, some goals may include better getting to know your members. For example, ask questions such as why did they choose to serve with the VISTA program and your specific VISTA project? What are their skills, interests, and hobbies? And what do they bring to your project and how can you help them grow? You want to make sure that you establish a good working relationship such that you discuss problems as they arise and don't wait until they become unbearable. You want to make sure that you work together to think about how you can help each other thrive. We all love efficiency. I don't know anyone who doesn't. And of course, supervisors are extremely busy and want to figure out how they can work smarter and not harder. Poor or insufficient communication causes increased workload in following up, getting clarification, and even dealing with unhappy people. Hopefully, you don't have any unhappy members, but you want to make sure that you strive for effective communication because that can truly increase your efficiency and avoid delays. Inspire and engage members. 1 year is a short time frame. It seems long, but 365 days will go by in a flash. And your words, actions, and body language can truly motivate and encourage members to do their best for themselves and their project. And I also want to highlight retain members because there are numerous reasons why someone, one or more of your VISTA members, may decide to end their year of service early. It may not have anything in relation to you, it could be other factors, but there's so many things that factor into a member's retention. If you are regularly communicating with your members and working to build strong bonds, and I know several of you in the earlier chat communication talked about ways that you are communicating with your members, it gives you a better chance of retaining them throughout their year of service and even possibly having them do a second year or maybe even join your organization as staff when their year is over. Unfortunately, we all know, and I can speak from personal experiences, challenges do exist. And you may encounter challenges in how you communicate to your members, or you may encounter challenges in how your members communicate to you. Some of these are simple fixes, some of them are more complex, but the earlier you start focusing on communication when a member starts, the better. So now we're going to explore a few of the common challenges that have been brought to our attention over the years. So some of the challenges that you may have encountered with your members' communication to you is, first, maybe they're not responding to emails, phone calls, or messages. Again, there could be so many reasons for this. It could be that they're sick and they just don't feel well. Maybe they're unhappy with you or the Vista project. Hopefully not, but sometimes they ghost you. It also could be that they simply missed your email with all the work that they're doing on their VAD. Maybe they just missed it and sending a second email would be great. Or it could be that you sent them a message that was more of an FYI for your information and it didn't specify that you wanted a response. So they thought, okay, there's no reason to respond. So that's one of the challenges that you sometimes encounter. Another one is sometimes your members may provide insufficient or vague responses, which gives you a reason to check your communication and really make sure that you are specifically clear in what you are asking. Then, take some time to ask the member to give more of an explanation. The member may be unsure who the direct supervisor is. I know you're probably thinking, well, how is that possible? They should know who their supervisor is. Well, we agree, but you'd be surprised at how many members still continue to start service through the VISTA member orientation, and they let us know even on their first day of service, they don't know who their supervisor is. A lot of times, this is because even though they've been communicating with you or someone at the project, their direct supervisor never explicitly said to them, I am your direct supervisor. Seems like very simple words, but trust me, it goes a long way, along with giving them your contact information. If a member is not doing what they are asked, maybe you ask them to work on a project and you notice they're just doing their own thing. First, you want to reach out to them and have an honest conversation to ask how they're doing in their VISTA year and if they need anything. Maybe they're struggling, maybe they don't understand what you needed, or maybe they're just shy and you asking them lets them know that you care about them. Take some time to think about how can you incorporate their skills and interests in the work that they're doing, but also help them understand that there are tasks, such as in the VAD, that they do need to do as a VISTA member. And recognizing that just as each supervisor is different, each VISTA member is different, there's not a one size fits all for communication. Generally, there could be general communication that you send to all of your VISTA members, but also know that your member may have a different communication style than the rest of your staff, such as you may have a member who prefers texting instead of emailing, or they want to do something else. There's nothing entirely wrong with that, but it's important to think about that not as a problem or a challenge, but as an opportunity for you to really get to know the different communication styles. And then as you look at them all, try to come up with a solution that works for everyone, or you may have to customize and tailor your communication style just slightly to meet each person's needs so that it's effective for you and it's effective for them. We want you to realize that your member may also have challenges with the communication that you as the supervisor are providing them. So first, think about if you're asking for too much at one time, or if you're asking for too much communication. For example, asking the member to email you when they start their day and when they end their day, as well as with a summary of daily accomplishments, it could work for you, but it also might be a little bit too much. You may want to try to find a middle ground to get what you need while also letting them know that you want to trust them and be there to support them. Also, failure to regular communicate with your member, such as on a weekly basis, can be really frustrating and isolating. I know when I served as a member, I was fortunate to have my supervisor very, very close in the same office space as me, but still we struggled with communication and we took it for granted that we were in the same office, but we were not verbally communicating as much. And in some ways, that was kind of isolating. So whether you're in person with your members currently or remote, make sure that you're in touch with your members so that they know that you have not forgotten about them, that they know that you can support them, and so that they know that they can reach out to you with any questions or concerns. And speaking of teleserving, if you currently have any members who are currently working remotely, teleserving is what we call it, having every single meeting on video may be draining and tiring. I'm not saying don't do it, but really take some time to think about it. We all know that video is great to see people and we want to connect with them, but it takes a lot of mental and physical energy for some people. So you may want to consider using it sparingly. Maybe if you're meeting with your members weekly, maybe you only do a video once a month, or you give them a little bit more space and take advantage of the special times to use the video in meetings so that it's a little bit more powerful and impactful. Again, keep in mind that video meetings can be useful and great to connect, but are not necessarily always as effective as people may think. If you are not asking your member for feedback on how you can improve your communication with them, that is a huge missed opportunity. And again, you don't have to ask them at every single meeting, but at least on a quarterly basis or maybe monthly, check in with them because if you're not asking them for feedback, they may have strong opinions, but they may not share it with you and you may not know how you can improve. We know no one is perfect and we can all improve, so it's important to work together to establish and cultivate the working relationship. Similarly, challenges may arise if you never really talked about your preferred communication style. You may prefer communication via email, and it's not necessarily to say that you are demanding that communication style with the member, but you're trying to work with them to figure out for the next 365 days, how can you and your members work together? You have your preferences and desires, your members may have theirs, but you want to continue to communicate with them about communication, especially in their first week of service and during the on site orientation and training, because getting their feedback and enlisting their opinion on how both of you can improve and establish will go a long ways. I want to get your thoughts since you currently work with members and have experience in communicating with them. So in the chat, you can type your response to the question, what communication challenges, if any, have you encountered with your members? As you type your communication challenges, I will also invite you to share your suggested solutions to other people's challenges. And you may not have any challenges, which is great, but certainly feel free to type those in the chat. We do know that not all challenges are bad, but it is important to identify the challenge first and then work on your own and with your members towards a solution. And sometimes I will quickly add that it can be truly, truly helpful to get your members to also think about a solution so it doesn't always look like you have to come up with a solution, and it gives the member a little bit more autonomy and power to help them realize they have control over the situation as well. So I see a couple of comments coming in briefly. Some of the challenges are the VISTA member is not available via email or text. Okay, there's certainly some solutions around that, maybe calling them or next time you are able to get in touch with them, find out what their communication style is. Another challenge is figuring out how often to communicate. And I would quickly suggest you come up with your suggestion of how often to communicate. But then before telling your members that, ask them how often they want to communicate. It could be that you are both on the same page. And if you're drastically different, if you say every day and the member says once a month, maybe start out with once a week and then evaluate it on a monthly basis to see how to improve. Lots of good comments coming in and challenges. Well, it sounds weird to say good challenges, but I'll review one more. And some new supervisors say sometimes it's difficult because if a VISTA member has been serving and the old supervisor leaves who didn't communicate with the member and now you're the new supervisor, it's challenging to kind of build that rapport and get the member excited. And I would quickly say, I think one of the greatest ways to build that rapport is to, in a respectful way, let the member know that you are a new supervisor. You are not taking the place of the other person. You're not the same as the other person, but here are the outlines and expectations you have. Here are the goals you have for the member. And here's how you want to help not only improve your work, but really show the member that you are really and truly there for their success. So please keep those challenges coming. And if you have, as I said, solutions to people's challenges as well, type those in the chat and make sure that we get those captured because this is a learning opportunity for us as well as for you to share information with each other. Let's talk about the 5 C's that will help you strive towards collaborative communication. In all honesty, there are way more than 5 words that start with C, but I also want to try and be effective in my communication with you in the short time that we have. Your communication with your members is absolutely essential to their motivation, their success, and their retention. You have certain expectations of them. They undoubtedly have expectations of you as a supervisor. And both of you may have to flex a little bit with your styles to make sure that you communicate effectively. The first C that starts us off is for clear. What good is it to communicate if the person on the receiving end does not understand? Sure, you cannot make your members understand, but you can phrase your communication, whether it's verbal or in writing, in simple ways. If the message gets tangled during the delivery or in translation, it just creates a mess, and no one likes mess. So let's try to untangle that. Just as advertising on a billboard should be clear and captivating because when you think about it, you're passing by on the highway going 70 miles an hour, you only have a split second to pay attention to it. Your communication must be clear to aid your members in quickly understanding it so they can get going with their activities. Okay, sure, they have more than a split second to understand your communication, but you don't want them to spend several days wondering, what was my supervisor talking about? So let's give you some suggestions for clear communication. Spell out acronyms. I know sometimes we think about this and we do it, but I can say from working in my agency, it can become common knowledge that you just type an acronym, not even thinking about it because it's internal. But thinking about your members don't really understand what that means, or maybe you've used it with them once, but haven't reminded them what it means. So spell out the acronyms to make sure that they fully understand what you're talking about. Also, organize your thoughts. Sometimes it is very appropriate to brainstorm and just allow thoughts to be free flowing. But in general, you really want to avoid bouncing around too much and try to stay on one topic at a time. Your member has so many things on their mind, including getting situated in the community, maybe finding housing, figuring out what is VISTA and what is this VISTA project. So the more that you can stay focused really helps your members as well. Be explicit about whether the communication is informational or if you want them to respond, and it could be both. So, for example, it can be easily unclear if someone is supposed to respond, and then when the supervisor does not get a response, maybe they feel that the member just does not care. When you want the VISTA member to acknowledge receipt or reply with comments, make sure you let them know that you are specifically looking for a response to that communication. We also want you to make your messaging crystal clear and transparent so that your statement is obvious. In verbal communication, utilize different tones in your voice. Pause periodically after a comment to let them absorb it, and speak loudly and slowly. Sometimes I struggle with that where I get caught up in speaking very fast or I speak at the same tone, and you can change that. It makes a big difference to the listener. But I do want to caution you here. Make sure that you understand that talking louder and sometimes even yelling does not necessarily equate to effective communication. I don't know about you, but I sure don't like people yelling at me, even if they need me to do something immediately. And in written communication, take advantage of formatting. Don't go overboard, but take advantage of bullets and numbers, maybe italicizing quotes, and making critical action steps stand out. It not only helps the learner and the reader visually, but it helps your organization and your communication to be more clear and succinct and highlight what you're looking for. So let's move on to the second C on our list. And in this C, we are talking about concise. Now, keep in mind, this does not mean that all of your communication is limited to just 30 seconds of speech or maybe a paragraph of writing, but it does mean that in most cases, you do not want to send a dissertation. But of course, there may be times that you do want to expand upon what you're saying so that your members have the necessary context they need. Some suggestions for concise communication include having you start with the idea that less is more. Knowing that your members are probably receiving information from VISTA headquarters, from your intermediary project if you are a subsite, and other information that they're getting in their email, their phone, their all kinds of technology, you want your communication to stand out. One of the ways to do that is to keep it short so that they'll more likely to read it and also be very clear about the subject line so that they know what to expect when they open it. You also want to avoid run-on sentences that cause confusion and end up really burying the point and the intent of the message. Try as much as possible to get to the point. And then, if you want to add more detail afterwards, you can. That gives the member a chance to understand the main idea, and then it gives them the option to continue reading on. And try to use key points to highlight the main things you want to convey, and then have detail available if needed. How else can you be concise in your messaging? Well, if you have a lot of information to communicate, and oftentimes you do at the start of service, consider arranging it by topic and priority. Maybe you split it up into shorter chunks, like we do in some of the webinar slides. Maybe if you have in-person meeting, you shoot for a 30-minute meeting or no more than an hour. Because oftentimes if you plan for a 2 or 3 hour meeting, you end up using that time whether you need it or not, and people feel like it can be a waste of time. Because sometimes what you want to say can easily be said in a shorter amount of time, and you want to be flexible and adaptable to have the right amount of time, but not make people feel like time is wasted. Also, try not to overcomplicate it. I know, speaking personally, I'm a very complex person, and people I've worked with say that I'm very detailed, which I think is great. But oftentimes in my responses, because I'm detailed, it complicates things and it confuses people. So I've learned that sometimes and maybe this is the case with you may not need to go into detail. You may want to just share the bullet points or highlight the information, and then if someone asks for more detail, you can go into that detail. So really consequently think about the receiving end and how much your member may be likely to read or want to read. The third C is for continuous. A circle, another word starting with C, I didn't plan that, is continuous and never ends. And again, please do not interpret this to mean that you should talk for the entire duration of your meeting with members or that you should talk nonstop because you think overcommunicating is the best way to communicate. Yes, there are instances in which overcommunicating does serve a purpose and it can create positive outcomes, but in general, you do want to provide ongoing support to your members in person and remotely through regular, continuous communication. Some suggestions for continuous communication include you working to create and maintain a regular expected time frame for communication. It doesn't mean that you can't send a random email at 3:30 when you need to get something out, but maybe you start out with having a 30-minute meeting every Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning. The meeting is continuous, the member knows what to expect, it's a weekly meeting, and it shows the member that you are dedicating time on a long-term basis specifically to work with them. Plan a regular schedule for when your member will need to send you information about what they are doing. And what I mean here is in relation to things like reports. We know that oftentimes VISTA project directors are responsible for submitting reports to AmeriCorps, and oftentimes they will ask you as the supervisor to send information to them for those reports. So if you as the supervisor are asking your members to compile details to send to you, maybe you ask them to do it every 3 months or once a month, but set intervals and schedule them so that the member, again, has that communication in mind, knowing what to expect, and they can understand, okay, at the end of the month, I need to send this to you. Make sure you schedule those dates in advance. Moreover, as you avoid having long gaps without communication, I really think we all know that your members don't want to feel isolated. I know that I didn't. And they also don't likely want to feel that you are hovering or micromanaging. And you may not think you are, sometimes it happens. So try to find the right balance in being continuous, though you can adapt as needed, but make sure your communication and style and approach are as continuous as possible and regularly talk with your members in advance if you expect any changes in continuity. They like to have a heads up in advance. You'll also hear us mention the word feedback a couple of times because it is vital. Periodically ask your members about the frequency of your communication. Ask them about the content of your communication. You can even ask them about different parts of the communication. But again, even though 365 days is short, it's so critical that you get feedback so you have time to improve well before the member ends. You want to make sure that the recipients of the communication, your members, understand how they can adjust their style and how you can adjust your style so that it works as seamlessly as possible together. Moving on to the fourth C, we are talking about controlled. This word has a few meanings. So, air traffic control manages the communication from the airport to incoming and outgoing airplanes. You help to control communication between you, your members, and organization staff. So, in essence, you are air traffic control. You just may not get a really cool hat, although it would be nice if you did. Actually, I don't know if air traffic control gets a hat, but anyways, if you are writing or verbalizing your communication, you are in full control of it, how it takes off, and sometimes even how it lands in your member's ear. You can phrase and rephrase, you can determine how it starts and ends, and you have the power to structure it in a way that you think will have the greatest impact. Some suggestions for controlled communication include you structuring your communication such that you control when you are communicating with your members. For example, contact them at 5 p.m. about a project that's not urgent, but you want them to do in a couple weeks. It's not a big deal, but it's also not ideal because they may think you want them to do something urgently. So you may want to decide to send that tomorrow morning or wait until a more convenient time. You also really want to try to avoid asking your member to perform a non-urgent task in the middle of an urgent project. It can confuse communication and really help the member not understand what your priority truly is. As we mentioned earlier, you also control the tone of your voice, you control the tone of your writing, and to a certain extent, you control the quote unquote tone of your body language. For example, are you just sending a note to say hello and see how they are doing? Or are you calling the member to remind them of something they need to do? Sometimes you may mean a positive tone, but if you use bold capital letters in red and increase the font size, the member possibly is going to perceive that you're yelling at them or that you really want something urgently. Every element of your communication makes an impact. So the more controlled your temperament and style, the better. In addition, a couple more things we'll highlight. You control how you talk with and write to your members. You can incorporate your personality into your communication to be professional and personable while also conveying the information that you want to give them. If you're upset about something, including something that your member just did or sent to you, take a few minutes before you respond. Control your action, your reaction, and your response. You probably already know this, but steps like this can make a huge difference in how the member perceives your communication. And you also control how you react to what your members say or send you. Whether you are already in a good or bad mood, and whatever is on your mind, you can control your communication response by taking some time to articulate a response before responding. Maybe you even need to rewrite or have someone look at your response before you send it. Consider assuming positive intent in the communication, and when ready, have a conversation with your member. The fifth and final C is closing out our communication, and it stands for customized. You customize your office or your home office space with things that make you happy and smile and comfortable. You customize your computer's wallpaper and background. As I'm talking, you may even be customizing your delightful cup of coffee or tea just the way you like it. Just as each of your VISTA members is different and unique, your communication with each of them may need some customization based on each member's communication style and needs. Customizing your communication makes it more personal to your members, and it may also increase your chances of having them understand and follow you throughout their year of service. So let's give you a couple of suggestions. First, review their member application in the My AmeriCorps portal that you access via eGrants to see if any of their skills and interests can be incorporated into your communication to better keep them engaged. This gives you information so that you can adapt and modify your communication plan and activities in ways that customize and personalizing the messaging to each VISTA member. Learn more about your members in your regular meetings. In addition to talking about business, you can certainly ask formal questions such as, tell me more about yourself, or what makes you, you? Maybe you ask questions such as, what motivates you to serve as a VISTA member with our project? Or any other type of question to gather insight and listen specifically as to how they respond and observe their body language. Customizing communication makes it personal to the individual as they receive email and directed to them. So let me go over a personal touch that we'll talk about for just for you. A personal touch every now and then can really go a long way to make the member feel that your sentiment is intended just for them. So to do that, respect and build off differences in communication. If you have some members who do better with visual communication, maybe they like presentations and screenshots, or others who prefer communication via text message, respect those differences while you try to see how you can use those differences in a positive way. Maybe it means conducting more interactive meetings and periodically sending text message notifications. You don't have to look at different preferences in a negative way, but look at it in a way that can help you be more versatile in your communication approach. And then this one is really important and personal to me. Share a little bit about yourself. Of course, you don't have to give them your personal life story, but members want to know who their supervisor is and why you're in your position and why you're supervising vistas. So whether it's in a video conference, an email, an in-person meeting, customize your communication by sharing more about who you are and why you're there. It not only gives them more insight into how you may be as a supervisor, but it also really encourages the member to open up and share things that you can use in future customized communication. We're going to launch a very quick poll, and I'm curious, the question that you'll see on the screen is, which of the 5 C's needs the most improvement in the communication with your members? And if you don't know the answer to this, that's fine. And as I mentioned earlier, there's more than 5 Cs. But when you look at clear, concise, continuous, controlled, customized, say that 5 times fast, which of these do you think needs the most improvement in the communication with your members? Whether you have one member or multiple members, we know that there's always room for improvement. And I'll quickly add that I'm often challenged, as I mentioned earlier, with being clear and concise. And I probably struggle the most with being concise. The good thing, though, is that once you know where you are and where you need help, you can then find ways with the support of other supervisors and other resources to make those improvements, whether it be getting someone to review your communication before you send it, or taking an hour and rereading your message before you deliver it to make sure it's appropriate for your audience. So I'll give you about 5 more seconds to complete the poll, as it looks like most people have pretty much finished it. So we'll go ahead and close it. And overwhelmingly, 30% is the highest number, need more assistance with concise. And there's no wrong answer, so I don't want anyone to think that they're bad. There's no wrong answer, but this helps you see among yourself and with other supervisors where people fit along this time frame. So thank you for that activity. Hopefully this helps you think about how you can focus on improving your communication in general and with your members, because I found self-reflection and acting on the specific results can be positively transformative for what I do and then how that helps other people with their communication. So I'm going to be a little bit corny now and say arrows are not pointless, and neither is communication. An arrow communicates a direction, but you still need to take action to move in that direction. So be proactive and intentionally focus some time and effort on communicating with your members. Make sure that you know where you are starting, where you are headed, and in which direction you need to go. A couple of things for you to remember when working with your VISTA members. Communication is not automatic. Sometimes I and others take it for granted that, oh, of course you're going to communicate. Well, it doesn't happen on its own. So you and your members need to understand that it's a process and it takes time to cultivate and sustain. Communication, like pretty much everything else in life, requires work. Even if you have a good working relationship with your members, you still need to strive to effectively communicate in writing, verbally, in as many ways as you communicate. Communication involves you. You are the direct supervisor supporting and guiding the member. They look to you for advice, you're their first point of contact, and you will want and need to know how to effectively communicate with them from their first day of service all the way through their last day of service. Communication can really make or break a member's service year and experience. The more effort you put into working with your members to establish strong communication, the more likely you will help to make their service a great year of service. So before we go over a few recommendations and resources, we want to pause and check your knowledge of a couple of things. So you'll see a new poll appearing on your screen, and we'll give you about 2.5 to 3 minutes to complete this. For each question, you can only submit one response. And based on the information that we shared with you, we're going to ask you 3 questions. The first is, one of the 5 C's to improve your communication with members is to be blank. Second question is, I can minimize communication challenges with members by blank. And then the third question is, when getting to know your members, you should blank. So we'll give you about 2 minutes to think about each option, and then you can select and submit your response. And while you're completing the poll, we'll play a little bit of music to help you get in the mood. So we're going to close the poll now. Thank you for those who participated. It looks like almost everyone responded, and I'll just very quickly give you the answers. Great job to most of you. The answer to question number 1 is concise. The answer to question number 2 is controlling how much and how frequently I communicate. And then the correct answer to number 3 is have a conversation with them about their communication style and preference. So great job. We're going to go over a few more slides and then get to questions that we can squeeze into this time. So I want to highlight a few recommendations and resources for you before we continue. So when you look at the recommendations for success, we're going to start out with the first one, which is, you already heard this before, and I'll mention it again because of its critical importance in every aspect of VISTA member supervision, including in your communication. You want to regularly meet with your members, ideally on a weekly basis, at least to start out. You may migrate to bi-weekly later, but it's critical to start out early, not just so that you get their communication, but again, it helps your member understand that you truly have their best interest in mind. Some of you talked about you communicate on a daily basis. If that works for you and your members, that's great. Some people think that's too much, some don't, but find out what works for you. Second, discuss your and their communication styles, preferences, and frequency. Come to an understanding of how you can work together. Third, if appropriate, and if it does not cause confusion or anxiety with your members, periodically switch up your communication style. Maybe if you always send emails, perhaps once a month have a phone call or video call. If your communication is always verbal, think about the possibilities of a visual presentation to supplement it. You can add pictures and graphics. Changing things up really adds engagement to your communication. Fourth, try writing down your thoughts before communicating verbally. I've tried this and sometimes it can be truly helpful. Whether you read from them or not, it does help me to prepare, structure, and assess my tone and better give me notes for follow-up afterwards if necessary. Fifth, we're going to ask you to reflect and think about your communication with members. What works well? What could you do differently? How can you be better and more motivational in your communication? Sixth, actively listen to what your members are saying and how they are saying it. And I can't stress that enough. The how they are saying it is critical because you can learn a lot from their body language, their tone, and just how they come across and are perceived. When reading written communication from members, be sure to read and sometimes reread what they wrote to help you understand it. Number 7, ask your members for feedback. And again, I would encourage you to ask for specific feedback as well as general feedback, because the more information you can have via data and expectations, the better. And then last but not least, have fun with it. Don't think of communication as a chore, even though we know it's a necessity, but think of it as an engaging way to really get to know and work with your members, especially because some of them may want to continue on into a second year of service with your project, or they may ask you if your organization has positions available for them to apply to after the year of service. Keep the communication going and keep it engaging. I'm very excited to say, as you have heard, the new VISTA campus, which is an incredible resource for you, launched on Friday, June 1st, just over a week old. And when you navigate to learn.americorps.gov, it'll bring you to this page with the AmeriCorps.gov menu at the top and the login section of the new VISTA campus in the middle. Here's where you obviously log in or create a new account. And please note that if you did previously have an account in the old VISTA campus, you can simply request a new password to gain access and log in. Once logged in, you'll see this main page in the menu of buttons. You'll want to access the learning paths by clicking on the catalog button. And very briefly, if you are a VISTA sponsor staff, including project directors, you want to make sure that you subscribe to and take this specific training on the VISTA sponsor orientation. It contains important information about VISTA project management, roles and responsibilities, and especially if you're a new sponsor staff member, this will give you a great foundation. If you're a direct supervisor of members or leaders like you on this webinar, then this learning path is for you, called Foundations of VISTA Member Supervision. You'll learn about many important elements to supervising VISTA members, which is different from supervising staff, as well as insights and recommendations, including recorded webinars to help you succeed as a VISTA supervisor. We covered a lot in a short period of time today. We talked about your communication audiences and who's involved. We talked about the purposes and goals of communicating with your members. We highlighted some challenges involved in communication. We then explored the 5 C's to help you be more effective in your communication with members. And then we just recently covered recommendations and resources for you. So we are going to ask you to take a minute to complete this evaluation. We truly value your feedback. It makes a big difference as we plan for future sessions. The link will be posted in the chat panel, and you'll also be brought to the survey after the webinar is over. But please, please, please take some time to fill out this short 3 to 4 minute survey. We greatly appreciate it. I do want to highlight very quickly our next monthly VISTA Supervisor webinar. It is titled Successfully Managing Your VISTA Project, and it'll be on Tuesday, July 20th, earlier than normal, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock Eastern. And I am very, very excited because this webinar will have a guest speaker. It's Project Director, Christina Penland, who's the VISTA Project Director at RSVP Serves. She'll be providing some of her insight and recommendations along with other information. So we encourage you to attend and register. And this webinar is ideally suited for VISTA project directors who overall oversee and manage the VISTA project. And then speaking of upcoming webinars, people have asked, oh, how do I find out about upcoming webinars? Well, this is a screenshot of the new calendar on the new VISTA campus. When you log into your account and click on the calendar on the menu, you then click on any date that has a blue dot next to it, for example, July 20th, and that will show you a summary of the event in the dark blue banner at the bottom. Then if you click on the title of the event, it'll show you the specific details of the webinar, a summary, as well as a link to register. So you can always find upcoming events here. So with that, I'm going to take some time in the short time we have to answer some questions that came up. And the first question that I saw earlier in the presentation was, when asking the VISTA member for feedback, what kinds of prompts work best? So I will go ahead and answer that quickly, but if you have answers to that question, what kind of prompts work best for asking the VISTA for feedback, please share those in the chat. So part of it depends on your connection with your member and how well you know them, but my suggestion when it comes to prompts for feedback is it depends on if you're looking for general feedback or specific feedback. General feedback is, oh, how do you like the VISTA program? Or do you have any questions about your VAD? Whereas specific feedback questions might be, okay, well, I see that your task is to search for grants for us to apply for and outline specific tasks for that feedback, such as what was the search process like and how did you find this? It's not a prompt per se, but it's a way to first communicate to your members that you want their feedback. I think that's the best prompt, is to openly let them know you want to hear from them. But then also let them know, do you want them to candidly provide you feedback throughout the year? Or are you going to periodically, let's say on a monthly basis, specifically request feedback? Certainly share other ideas in terms of, I see in there, people have had luck asking for both positive and negative or constructive feedback, which I think is an absolutely great idea, because it's great to have positive feedback, and it's also great to have feedback that is encouraging but also requesting action. And then I love the idea of providing simple examples of each, the positive and the negative / constructive, to demonstrate what they're looking for. Definitely keep those comments coming, because again, this webinar is for everyone. And one other question I saw very quickly was around struggling to communicate with people who are not responding. People meaning VISTA members, of course. The question was, how do we deal with this and how do we get them to respond? So that's a longer question, but I will briefly say, look at your communication. If you're always communicating with them via email, maybe try giving them a quick phone call, because honestly, I find that hearing someone's voice and their excitement and their energy motivates me to say, okay, well, maybe I am appreciated as a VISTA member. If you've tried all things and they're still not responding, then you might want to see if there's another VISTA at your project that is working there, and are they not communicating at all, or are they not just communicating with you? because there could be other issues, but you want to try as best as you can to have some kind of a one-on-one meeting with that individual just so that you can really find out, and this relates to feedback, what can we do to help you? What, are you not feeling well? Do you not enjoy your service? Is there anything we can do to help improve your service? We want to be here for you. And there's lots of other ideas. And again, please share those in the chat. We really want to encourage you to do what you can to improve your communication, but also actively help your members improve their communication so that they're regularly communicating with you. With that, I do want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us on today's session. Thank you for the great work you do as VISTA supervisors. I'm always amazed at the amount of work that you all juggle. Thank you, of course, to my editor, support team, and supervisor, Barbara Reynolds. Thank you to our partners at LSI, Jeff Bannis and Steve Gray, for Zoom and all the technology support. Thank you to all of you. This concludes today's session. Have a great day, and don't forget, communicate.